everybody. We appreciate you joining us again for Wednesday night Bible study. Tonight we are going to be continuing our study on the book of Ecclesiastes that we started last week. If you remember, last week we basically just did an introduction to the book, going over basically what it's about. We talked a little bit about the supposed author of it, who is King Solomon. And basically, we discussed the fact that this book, and what's so interesting about it, both to myself and to Pastor Jeremy, is that the book of Ecclesiastes, it almost reads as a book of do's and don'ts for someone trying to live a Christian life. We do know that King Solomon was considered the wisest person that ever lived. So it seems that, having a book about what to do and what not to do in life written by someone who was that wise, that's absolutely something that we want to study. That's something that we want to know everything about. We want to glean every bit of the information that we can from it. So we are going to get started tonight. As I mentioned before, the study is actually called Ecclesiastes Wisdom for Living Well. And it's written by Courtney Joseph, who is the author of the study that the women have been doing on the book of Ruth. It just incredibly educated and insightful and wise. Some of the things that she puts in here, we've all just very much grown to love. We've pulled so much out of it. So again, as I said last week, I'm hoping that you're able to do the same with this study, that you're able to pull things out of this book that you never realized, and that most importantly, you're able to apply it to your life. And, you're able to apply it to your daily living and your daily habits and things like that. So as we get started, this week we're doing chapters 1 and 2 of Ecclesiastes. So when we start into chapter 1 of Ecclesiastes, as we said last week, we start out with this cryptic introduction, right, where he won't introduce himself by his name. All he says is the preacher, the son of David, and the king in Jerusalem. And this is why we believe, and most scholars believe, that it is referring to King Solomon. But after he gives this this kind of cryptic introduction, what he spends a good bit of time talking about is this concept of being under the sun. And this is something that we're going to find all through the book of Ecclesiastes. He refers to what it is that we do in our daily lives. And everything that happens here is all happening under the sun, right? Which means it's what's happening on earth. This is the day-to-day happenings here on earth. And what happens here on earth has nothing to do, other than your salvation, with what happens above the earth, right? Which is considered, what we're doing for God's kingdom instead of what we're doing for our human life here. So you're going to see this phrase, under the sun, brought up many, many times throughout this study because he puts a lot of focus on it. So as he gets into this, to the first chapter, he says, what profit has a man of all his labor which he takes under the sun? One generation passes away and another generation comes, but the earth abides forever. The sun also arises, and the sun goes down, and hastes to his place where he arose. The wind goes toward the south, and turns about unto the north. It whirls about continually, and the wind returns again accordingly to its circuits. All the rivers run into the sea, yet the sea is not full. Unto the place from whence the rivers come, thither they return again. All things are full of labor, man cannot utter it. The eye is not satisfied with seeing, nor the ear filled with hearing. So basically, the point he's making here is that what happens on the earth, it's all about repetition, right? And we know this. And he's talking about the earth physically as well as us physically living in the earth. So he's saying, the earth is going to continually spin, right? It rotates on its axis, and it's going to do that all the time. It's never going to stop. He's saying that generations are going to come and they're going to go. That's not going to change. The rivers are going to continue to flow into the sea. It's not going to make the sea any larger. The rivers are just going to keep flowing into it. The wind is going to continue to move in the direction that it moves in. All of these things continue to happen. And so the point that he's trying to make is, he says, nothing changes. None of it is actually doing anything. None of it's actually, creating progress. It all just keeps happening. And so he's saying what we do here is the same thing. What we're doing under the sun doesn't profit us anything. And so, as he talks about this whole concept of repetition and us never getting anywhere, it's something that probably most of us can very much identify with, right? Especially, when I was reading this, my mind went straight to young moms. I remember, when my kids were little bitty, talking about, ages, like newborn and toddler, those kind of ages. If you start talking to moms of kids of that age, you'll find out pretty quickly that their frustration comes from the fact that every day is the same. They don't actually feel like they're getting anywhere. They wake up early in the morning and they make pancakes and there's Veggie Tales and they're trying to clean the house, but they're trying to potty train the kids and they've got diapers to change, and then they've got to make lunch, and then they've got to clean up the mess that the kids made from lunch, and it's this cycle that goes throughout the day. And at night they get the kids laid down in bed and they're tired, and they, their head hits their pillow, and the first thing they think is, I'm going to wake up tomorrow and I'm going to do the exact same thing all over again that I just did. And I remember that feeling as a young mom of thinking, this isn't actually getting me anywhere. All I'm doing is the same thing every day, and I'm not actually working towards something at the end of the day, because when I wake up tomorrow morning, I'm going to do the same thing all over again. And it's incredibly easy to fall into this mindset, even with our day-to-day jobs, right? No matter what your job is, it's so easy to get a hold of this mindset of, well, I'm just showing up every day and doing the same thing over and over again. It's not getting me anywhere. We even used to complain about this at the hospital, and people would make comments and say things like, well, you're a nurse. That's got to be so fulfilling. You're doing something really useful every day. But, we would sit and talk about it sometimes, and we'd say, I took care of this patient. She had this problem, and I took care of her, and praise God, we had a good delivery, and the baby got here safely, and we did everything we had to do for the mom and gave her all of her medication and made sure she was okay, and we took care of the baby and made sure that the baby was thriving and was good to go, and then we sent them to the next unit, and we'd get done and we'd say, okay, that was a lot of work, but it's all done. And 30 seconds later, someone would come in the door screaming in pain, right? And we'd have to start the whole thing all over again. And we would fall into that same trap where sometimes we would sit there and say, it's just the same thing all the time. We're not getting ourselves anywhere. So this is kind of the point that Solomon was trying to make, was that he was searching. And we talked about this last week when I did the introduction, that most of Ecclesiastes, Solomon is trying to focus on the fact that he was looking for the wrong things. He spent his life searching for peace. He wanted answers. He wanted absolution for everything, and he was constantly searching for more. And he needed this validation for everything that he was doing. And so he starts to throw in these comments that it couldn't be found under the sun, because at the end of his life, he had finally come to this realization that, okay, down here is not what it's all about. It's not about the absolution here. It's not about the answers here. So he kind of moves into, we're going to get into, let's see, the constant repetitiveness. This is what he's dealing with now. He starts dealing with the fact that it ultimately ends up causing us to be unsatisfied. So here in we get into verse 8 through 11, he says, all things are full of labor, man cannot utter it. The eye is not satisfied with seeing, nor the ear filled with hearing. The thing that has been, it is that which shall be, and that which is done is that which shall be done, and there is no new thing under the sun. Is there anything whereof it may be said, see, this is new? It has been already of old time, which was before us. There is no remembrance of former things, neither shall there be any remembrance of things that are to come with those that shall come after. So basically, we start to see here that as he's trying to pursue answers and he's trying to pursue absolution, he's becoming extremely unsatisfied with everything. And this is something obviously we can all relate with as well. We all know what it's like. We might pray for satisfaction, and I know it's all throughout the Bible. The Bible tells us to be satisfied wherever it is that we're at, be content. But it's part of human nature, right? We're constantly looking for better. We get on Facebook and we're scrolling through Facebook and we see people that we think look better than we do, or they have more than we do, or they're doing more with their lives than we're doing with our lives. And ultimately it starts to create this sense of being unsatisfied. and it causes us to pursue more earthly things, whereas we should be pursuing heavenly things. That feeling of dissatisfaction from everything constantly being repetitive and doing the same thing all the time and feeling like you're never actually getting anywhere with it. Ultimately, if that's what you're keeping your focus on, you're going to start feeling more and more dissatisfied. So we move into verse 12, and he kind of shifts a little bit, and he starts talking about how he started searching for wisdom. And obviously we know already he was the wisest man who ever lived. But because of this personality trait of his, right, where it was never enough, he had to have more. So even though God had blessed him immensely with wisdom and with riches, he felt like he needed more wisdom. He felt like he needed more knowledge. He kept thinking, I know so many things. And obviously, you know, we talked about how people would come from miles around just to hear him talk and to be under his teachings because he was so wise. But to him, it wasn't enough. He was constantly on the search for more. And so I'm going to skip down to, verse 14. It says, I have seen all the works that are done under the sun, and behold, all is vanity and vexation of spirit. And basically the concept of vexation of spirit, that's something that we'll deal with a lot throughout Ecclesiastes as well. And basically when you're talking about vexation of spirit, he's basically saying, I'm still restless. There's no rest in this. I'm still constantly looking for more. There's never peace. There's never satisfaction. He says, that which is crooked cannot be made straight, and that which is wanting cannot be numbered. So basically, what he's kind of getting to here is, it's this concept. I love it. And we say it to our kids. And a lot of times you hear these motivational speakers that'll say, get out there and change the world. Right. And it's kind of like the background theme of everything. But basically what he's starting to realize, he said, I wanted more wisdom because I wanted to be able to change something. I wanted to make something different because I had so much wisdom. That's why I was searching for it. But basically what he says is, as I searched for it, I started to realize that no matter how much knowledge I had and no matter how much wisdom I had, that what was broken, I wasn't going to be able to make it straight. So basically he's saying no matter how much he wanted to change things for the good, right? And he could have had the best of intentions. And he could have truly been wanting to make a great impact on the world. But no matter how much wisdom or knowledge he had, he couldn't make straight what had already been broken. And, where the author of the study kind of gets in on this, she says, the problem is we tend to think that we're supposed to go out and change the world, right? We think if I go to college and I get this degree and this degree and this degree and I learn how to do this and this and this, then I can go out and change the world. And all these things that are wrong with the world, I'm going to make it better myself. But where the author kind of shifts this thinking here, she says, it's not up to us to change the world. That is the job of Jesus Christ, right? He came to change the world. We're just here, we can follow him. We can tell people about him, which is what we're commanded to do. We're commanded to live holy lives. We're commanded to witness. But ultimately, he is the one who does the changing. It's not us. We're not supposed to be trying to get more wisdom and knowledge so that we can change everything. It is him who changes. He is the one who makes people's lives better. He is the one who offers forgiveness. He is the one who makes dead things alive again. He's the one who comes in and makes old things new. That is all him. And this is where Solomon was really going wrong, is he honestly believed in his heart that he could get to a point where he had enough knowledge that he could be the one to change it. And he struggled with it because he wanted it to be on him. He wanted it to be him that changed everything and that made the world better. But that was never going to happen because we know that ultimately God is the one who changes and God is the one who brings new life. We cannot do that ourselves, no matter how much wisdom or knowledge we have. So this concept of, of him trying so hard to better everything that's under the sun, right? Through all of this, we see that he's not interested yet on things above. He is still in this mindset of under the sun. This is what he's working for. This is where he is putting all of his hopes and dreams into what's going on under the sun. And this, like we said, this is something that even now we fall into this trap daily. It's a struggle every day not to let ourselves get overwhelmed and bogged down with what we're doing here on earth. Because ultimately, what matters is what we're doing for the kingdom of God. And this is why, in the book of Colossians, Paul even warns us about it. He says, don't set your mind on things that are below. Set your mind on things that are above. Because when we're keeping this under the sun attitude, it takes our mind off of eternity, right? This life is fleeting. It's what does the Bible say? It's here for a moment. It's like vapor, and then it passes away, and then we're in eternity. So this is where we can learn so much from Solomon and his struggles with trying to, it's everything under the sun. I need it here. I need it now. I want to fix it here. And there's so much that we can learn just from even, these few verses that we've read so far about trying to keep that heavenly mindset and keeping our mindset on things above and not on those things that are under the sun. So as we get into chapter 2, this is where Solomon starts to talk a little bit about some more of his endeavors. So in chapter 1, we saw him, we could see his frustration about, the fact that everything's repetitive, it's all the same, he can't seem to get anywhere. And then his frustration about the fact that he can't seem to make anything change in his own power. But as we get into chapter 2, he starts talking about his pursuits in his life. And he starts out here in chapter 2 by talking about how he started to search for pleasure, okay? So he's been searching for knowledge and he's searching for power to fix things. Now we see him searching for pleasure. So we get into chapter 2 and he says, I said in my heart, go to now, I will prove you with mirth, therefore enjoy pleasure. And behold, this also is vanity. I said of laughter, it is mad, and of mirth, what good does it? I sought in my heart to give myself unto wine, yet acquainting my heart with wisdom, and to lay hold on folly, till I might see what was good for the sons of men, which they should do under the heaven all the days of their life. So he's talking about here, he's getting into this conversation of wanting to enjoy life, right? So we know that he's talking about how he works and he's searching and he's getting wisdom and he's getting knowledge, but he's saying, I tried to enjoy myself. I wanted to seek out pleasure. So he says, I wanted to spend time laughing, and there's nothing wrong with that. It's good for us to laugh. Laughter, it's wonderful. I love those feelings of, when we get tickled about something at home and one of us will start laughing, and then, Jeremy will get tickled and he'll start laughing, and then usually Savannah ends up just tears rolling down her face because she's laughing so hard. Those moments are good. But he's saying in his pursuit of earthly pleasure, he started seeking out people to make him laugh. And that didn't give him the pleasure he wanted. So then he turned to alcohol. And he's, talking about how he would drink wine to try to give himself pleasure. And then ultimately he starts, talking about his pursuit of sexual pleasure. We read that he had 700 wives and 300 concubines, right? He just kept, woman after woman after woman. He kept pulling them in, trying to find pleasure. And then he even gets into talking about all the physical things that he had. And we actually read through some of that last week in our introduction. It's verses 4-8. He starts talking about, I have buildings, and I have castles, and I have beautiful gardens, and I have servants. I have male servants, and I have female servants, and I have all this money. I have gold, and I have silver. And he's talking about all of these things that he has that he had hoped he would find pleasure in. But he's saying, the problem is, no matter what it is that I try to use to give my, to find pleasure in, it ultimately leaves me empty. And then verse 11, we'll read that. He says, then I looked on all the works that my hands had wrought, and on the labor that I had labored to do, and behold, all was vanity and vexation of spirit, and there was no profit under the sun. So here we see it again. He's saying, I found pleasure with all these amazing things. I was searching for it. I was just so certain that they would give me the pleasure that I needed. But they left him restless, right? That vexation of spirit. They still left him uncontent and still searching for more. So then as we get into verse 12, he starts to compare wise people and foolish people. And he says, I turned myself to behold wisdom and madness and folly. And folly is basically foolishness. For what can the man do who comes after the king, even that which has been already done? Then I saw that wisdom excels folly, and as far as light excels darkness. The wise man's eyes are in his head, but the fool walks in darkness. And I myself perceived also that one event happened to them all. Then, and this is kind of the key here. Then said I in my heart, as it happens to the fool, so it happens even to me. And why that this also, and why was I then more wise? Then I said in my heart that this also is vanity. For there is no remembrance of the wise more than of the fool forever, seeing that which now is in the days to come shall all be forgotten. And how dies the wise man? As the fool. So here he's making the point that even he started to realize he had all this wisdom, and this is what he was known for, right? He had wisdom and knowledge. But then he started comparing himself to a foolish person, and he said, okay, on earth, the foolish or the wise person, right? They're esteemed more highly than the foolish person. But what happens at the end of that? They both die. It all ends the same. They're still both going to die. This earthly body is going to be taken from them. And they are both ultimately going to find themselves in a place where they're standing before God, having to account for what they did. And then what's going to matter is not what they did under the sun. What's going to matter is what they did for God's kingdom. And you could have been the wisest person here. You could have had fame and fortune, and it wouldn't matter. And if you did the Wednesday night study on Revelation with us, you probably remember we watched the video called 23 Minutes in Hell, and it's just incredibly powerful to listen to this man talk about this experience that he believed God gave him, where he got to experience what hell was like. And one of the things he said was that there was no identification, and that was something that kind of stuck with me. I thought it was so interesting. He said it didn't matter what you were on earth. You could have been a famous movie star, you could have been a famous athlete, you could have been all of these things, but in hell, nobody knew who you were. None of that mattered when you got there. It didn't matter how much money you died with. It didn't matter how much wisdom you died with. It didn't matter what the list of accomplishments you had. When you died, you either, found yourself in heaven or hell. And that's something that we saw him point out. And so as we get into verse 17, Solomon says, therefore I hated life, because the work that is wrought under the sun is grievous unto me, for all is vanity and vexation of spirit. So this is where he's finally starting to get it, right? He's starting to say, okay, I finally started to realize all of those things that I was working for, all the hard work that I had done, all the buildings that I had built, I hated it because it still left me restless. It still left me wanting for more. It still, at the end of the day, was just something that I did on this earth, and it didn't actually matter in eternity. So as we move into the end of chapter 2, he's addressing work. And I think, this is kind of interesting. He talks about how his frustration came from the fact that he had done so much in his life. He had built so many buildings. He had acquired so much wealth. He had built these beautiful gardens. He had, done all of these things. And he got to the point where he realized it was for nothing, because ultimately he was going to die and someone else was going to get to come along and enjoy his possessions, right? Verse 18 says, yes, I hated all my labor which I had taken under the sun, because I should leave it unto the man who shall be after me. So he finally, after doing all this, he realizes, what was the point of any of it? I'm going to die. This is not where I'm going to be forever. And somebody else is going to get to come behind me, and they didn't have to do all the work that I did. They're just going to get to enjoy the fruits of all my labor. So because of that, it's almost like he becomes angry at himself for doing all this work. And, we think about, we see people like that now, right? People that are, we call it workaholics, right? People that they work and they work and they work, and their mindset is just get more money. I've got to get more money. I've got to make sure, that my family has this amount of money when I go, and I've got to make sure I have all these earthly things, and they work and they work and they work, and they never actually are even able to take time to enjoy the fruits of their labor, which we know that Solomon did, and he points that out several times that he did. He took time to enjoy what he had gotten from his work. But even the joy that he got from it was still temporary. It was still an earthly thing. And that's something that, we ourselves need to remember as we go through our daily lives. Our jobs, we should be grateful for them. It's something we should thank God for. Our jobs we should be doing to the best of our ability. That's biblical. That everything we should, everything that we do, we are supposed to be doing it for the glory of God. And we are supposed to let Him be glorified through everything that we do, even if it's our day-to-day job. But that job is not supposed to be what our life focuses on. Our focus is supposed to be on our Heavenly Father and pointing people to Him, and where we're going to be in eternity, and are we pointing other people to that as well? But He's trying to make the point that here we get so fixated on it, on this job, and it becomes who we are and what we are and how we identify. But as we move into verse 26 here, he reminds us, and I love this. It says, "For God gives to a man that is good in his sight, wisdom and knowledge and joy. But to the sinner he gives travail, to gather and to heap up, that he may give it to him that is good before God. This also is vanity and vexation of spirit." So this is where he's finally pointing out that while he has been searching for all these things, right? He's searching for wisdom, he's searching for knowledge, he's searching for pleasure and joy. And at the end of it, we see, he's finally come to the conclusion that it's not for us to find those things for ourselves. When we give our hearts to God and we are His children, He gives us those things, right? We ask Him to give us knowledge, and we got to ask Him to give us wisdom, and that's something that should be part of our daily prayer life. And we ask Him for that joy and that fulfillment and that pleasure, and He gives us those things because we're His children and He loves us. And when we are seeking pleasure in the right things, He gives us that joy. And as Christians, we know there's a joy that is only found in Him. We have a joy that people who are not Christians, they'll never understand the joy that we have. And they can do what Solomon did and search for it and look in all these physical things to try to bring themselves that joy. But ultimately, they will never have that full joy, that full pleasure that we as Christians have, because it's something that we can only find in Him. So that's kind of where we're going to end here. I think it's, it's a good question, I think, to kind of ask ourselves, right? Is what kind of life are we living in regards to these two chapters? If you were to die today, would you be looked at? Would you be remembered as somebody who was living for things under the sun, or for what was gonna be waiting for you in God's kingdom? And that's something that I feel like we lose sight of so easily, just as even King Solomon did. He had completely lost sight of it. But it's something I feel like that's important, to have that daily reminder and to ask God for daily, to keep us fixed on Him, not on the things that are here, as Paul said, but on things that are above. So I would encourage you and challenge you to really, spend some time praying about that. Ask God to show you, if that's something that's a struggle for you. Ask Him to reveal to you if, the way you're going about your daily life, if you are more fixed on the things that are below rather than the things that are above, and where you're setting your sights and where you're setting your affections. So that is it for this week. Next week we will be doing chapters 3 and 4. I hope that you guys are enjoying the study. I know I'm already learning so much from it. If you have any questions about it at all, or if you have any input, anything that you want me to address, I will be happy to do that. So just give me a call or a text and let me know. We love you guys very much, and we will see you all bright and early on Sunday morning.